Hello, I'm John Perry, and I'm joined by Representative Gary Glenn for Representative Gary Glenn Reports. Good to see you, Representative.
Good to see you, sir.
You are joined today by Mike Goschka from your office.
My right-hand man who's sitting to my left right now. You're right at home. But John, appreciate this opportunity. I want to first give a quick health update because I think they have a right to know, and I know there's interest in my district that I represent, Midland and Bay counties, that my hair will grow back from the chemotherapy, but I can honestly say I feel normal to the extent I was ever normal, but I feel like I used to. Back to my race walking pace instead of a sluggish period I went through when I was doing chemotherapy. And of course you're well aware of that. Your wife and you yourself have been through that. So I guess I'm living proof that you can come out the other end. But just want to assure everybody, you included, that fully back on the job, engaged. In fact, the legislature is not even in session for the next several weeks. But I'm here in Lansing today doing business and interviewing various people, talking to people, because I'm in a position where I am sad certainly to see him go, but I have with me my Chief of Staff, Mike Goschka, former senator, former state representative, who is going to be leaving my office and going to assist another new freshman state representative who has come in halfway through or even more through the course of the last 2 years. But when Mike Goschka made it known to me out of the blue that he was interested in working for me after I was first elected, I considered it a godsend. I've said that a lot. I meant it. He's been an invaluable resource to my staff, and especially for a first-term legislator to come in. And I had some exposure and knowledge of the process. I've been involved from the outside. But to have the benefit of 14 years of experience, and Mike was a committee chairman in the Senate, that has been an invaluable asset. As, for example, I've tackled one of the major, I say the most complex issue we face in Lansing, the energy issue, and Mike has been an invaluable coordinator and manager of all the different groups. We have had meetings, I think, half a dozen times now, with 30 and 40 different groups around the table meeting to come up with a collaborative process whereby we protect an open market in Michigan, hopefully expand people's freedom regarding where they get their electricity. But I just wanted to ask Mike to be with me here today just to take the occasion to share with those people that I represent how invaluable he's been to my office, and to thank him and wish him well. And Mike, maybe you'll explain where you're headed, but I've certainly been blessed to have had Mike as a right-hand man for the last 22 months now.
Well, thank you for those kind words. I greatly appreciate it. I will say that when Representative Glenn was so gracious to hire me onto his staff, I really felt a genuine sense of renewed purpose in life. I love the arena of public policy, and I learned quickly that Representative Glenn was all about public policy. And I so enjoyed working with you to serve the residents of Midland and Bay counties. The commitment that he has shown, that you have shown to your constituents has been most remarkable. And I will forever be grateful for what you've done for me and for the opportunity to serve the people of Midland and Bay County with you. Some opportunities did present themselves to go to the office of Representative Gary Howell. I wanted to stick with the name Gary. That way I wouldn't forget first names. But he is from Lapeer County, very rural area, and I saw some opportunities there that I thought would be difficult to turn down. I am in the best of both worlds. I really am, from the perspective that I have worked for a man that in town became the Freshman Legislator of the Year in 2015 for what he did in the area of energy and other areas. He has a couple public acts to his name. He's worked so hard on so many fronts. And then I'm going to the office of another good man. And so I am not going away. I'm dropping down one floor. And as Representative Glenn knows, I am very much available at all times to help him in all that he does to make sure this is a smooth transition. I just want to say thank you again for the way you have been so kind and gracious to me and giving me the opportunity of a lifetime to come back to Lansing and to serve the people, particularly the people of your district. Thank you.
Well, and John, I make no bones about it. As a freshman legislator, it elevated my stature to have somebody like Senator Goschka.
Been here 14 years.
Yeah, for 14 years. So played an invaluable role, but I think I've learned a lot. The first 3 months, he was telling me all kind. We would debate various things, but I think I've learned. I think I can take my training wheels off now, and Mike can go on to assist somebody else who is just new to the process. But certainly appreciate everything he did, and I think we accomplished quite a bit.
Yes, we did.
Along those lines, as we come to the end of your first term in the Michigan House, it's probably a good time to assess those accomplishments and look back. You talked about one of them to a degree. Obviously, there has been a lot of discussion about energy policy. You're the vice chair of the Energy Committee. Very much one of the marquee issues out there during this session of the legislature, and you played a pivotal role.
Well, and we're told, if you read the news reports, that it is at the top of the list for the remaining 15 legislative days I think there are between now and the end of December. So it's not over yet, and we're not counting any chickens before they're hatched. But it is remarkable to me. When I took office in January of 2015, we were told that the energy reform bill would be on the governor's desk by June 1st. Well, June 1st came and went. Then it was September. Then it was the end of 2015. Now they're to the point of where they're hoping something might happen by the end of 2016. And the utilities, who have a virtual monopoly on Michigan's electricity market, have spent an estimated $7.5 million on television ads and lobbying and contributions to members of the legislature, which makes it all the more remarkable that at least so far we have stopped their attempt to eliminate electricity choice in Michigan. I think that would result in even higher electricity rates. We have the highest in the Midwest, 12th, 13th, 14th highest in the nation, depending on which month it is. And if you eliminate competition in any market, the result has to be an increase in electricity costs for homeowners, for commercial business owners, for major manufacturers. In my district, the cost of electricity is the single biggest expense of doing business for the major employer Dow Chemical, for Dow Corning, for Midland Cogeneration Venture. And so it's not just an issue for the average ratepayer who owns a home. It is a major factor in whether or not Bay and Midland counties will keep the job base we have now for decades into the future, and certainly is a key issue in whether or not we can attract more business and industry and other manufacturers. You know, Dow is talking about in the middle of a merger with DuPont, which they tell me means other businesses will want to come and invest around that hub in the Midland area, and the cost of electricity is going to be a key factor. So as Vice Chairman of the House Energy Policy Committee, I'm going to continue to fight to stop attempts to remonopolize all of Michigan's energy market, to do away with electricity choice. I'd like to see electricity choice expanded so that, for example, you no longer have the case where Bay City schools can be on the electricity choice market. That just means buy electricity from somebody other than Consumers Energy at $200,000 a year less. But it's against the law for Bullitt Creek and Meridian and Pinconning and Midland Public Schools to do the same. Or for Saginaw Valley State to save a couple $100,000 a year, as they do, by buying electricity from somebody other than Consumers. But Delta and Northwood, by law, can't do the same. That just simply doesn't make sense to me. And I'm hopeful that in the future, in the next legislative term, that I'll be in a position to have as much or more influence on the course of energy reform legislation. But Mike, as I indicated, was a valuable part of what we've accomplished, because my job was to legislate, which means putting together the pieces of 40-some different groups that we were juggling. And he was the one that was managing all of that input in such a way that he could communicate it to me and understand. It's one of the most complex issues we deal with. Yeah. And I try to explain it in as simple terms as possible. And I really think it comes down to this. If you have one grocery store in town, they don't have an incentive to keep the produce fresh, to keep the prices low, and to sweep the floors. But if there are two grocery stores and you as a consumer are free to choose, then they have the incentive because they have to compete with each other for your business, and you pick the one that does the best job of having the best produce, the cleanest floors, and the best customer service, and you get the best product for the best price with the best service. And I think that applies to every part of our economy, and I think it applies to the electricity market as well.
And as you point out, Representative, energy is really a golden thread that runs through so many different parts of our lives, whether it's as homeowners, local businesses, schools. What you're talking about here needs to be looked at in a prudent fashion because, after all, the impact is going to be out there for years, if not decades.
For decades to come. They don't rewrite the energy policy for the state every year. They do it maybe every decade. The last time was 2008. From 2000 to 2008, everybody in Michigan was free to choose where they bought their electricity. Everybody. And in 2008, a law was passed to cap that at only 10% of the electricity. So if you were fast enough to get into that 10%, then you had the benefit of, like Bay City Schools, saving $200,000 a year. If you weren't fast enough, you're stuck with the higher priced energy, electricity from consumers. That's not the only, that's the major issue involved. But for example, I've had the privilege of working with Midland Cogeneration Venture. Their interest is to be able to compete against the utilities. That's a major gas-fired electricity and steam producing plant out on Poseyville Road, adjacent to the Dow Chemical property. So they sell both electricity and steam to Dow Chemical, but they also produce additional electricity that they sell through consumers to others. So they sell to consumers as well. They'd like to be able to compete against consumers for new capacity of generation of electricity in the future. Currently, the utilities get the first right of refusal, and it's hard for anybody to compete with them. We'd like to see it put out to competitive bidding. Why do we put things out to competitive bidding in building a public construction project or a road? So that we get the best deal for the taxpayer, the best quality at the best price. And I think we ought to have that policy that apply to electricity generation as well. Not just have consumers say, we're going to build a new plant because we think we need it. The Public Service Commission should decide when we need new electricity capacity, and Midland Cogeneration Venture should be free to compete against the utilities for the ability to generate that new need for our homeowners and commercial businesses and manufacturers.
Representative, you have been Vice Chair of Energy this term. Regardless of what happens in those last 15 days, I have to imagine that you're looking forward to playing a leadership role on energy again in the committee in the next legislative session.
Well, I would hope so. I have served as Vice Chairman. Half of the Republican members of the committee are term limited, at least. I'm not even sure how many of the Democratic members. But I would guess that at least half, if not 2/3 of the entire committee are going to be term limited. It's so complex an issue that I doubt that someone who's not on the Energy Committee is going to be appointed chairman. I doubt that a freshman legislator is going to be appointed chairman. So I might be in a position to take that position. If so, I think people have a pretty good idea, love it or not, they have a pretty good idea of where I'm coming from. And it's so important to Midland County. I was talking about Midland Cogeneration Venture. Pete Milojevic is the CEO there, Charlie Dunn, their attorney, and they've been an invaluable asset to my ability. I've learned in this job you don't have to be an expert as long as you have access to expert knowledge, and they have been my expert knowledge on injecting competitive bidding into the process. Brooke Beebe with Dow Chemical for sure. And then we have three gentlemen, Steve Elbracht and Ted Skinner and John Bartos, who are well known in the Midland community, successful entrepreneurs. One was the founder, John Bartos, of Three Rivers Construction. The other was a Dow Corning retiree. But they've invested afterwards, for example, at the time in the largest solar energy array in the state of Michigan, privately held. And they've been an invaluable resource to my understanding of the issue, and sufficient to the point where I've actually been able to have impact on the process when I had no background knowledge, but I've had the ability to access knowledge from Mike, from Brooke Beebe, from Bartos and Elbracht and Skinner and Milojevic, all of these people who have nothing but the best interests of Midland and Bay counties at heart, who, basically, my dad was at Pearl Harbor. The chaplain of the USS New Orleans said, "Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition." And these folks have done a remarkable job of passing the ammunition. in such a way that I could address one of the most, I think, the most complex issue in Lansing in such a way as to actually have a significant impact on the outcome. And knock on wood, we've got about 15 legislative days to go before the end of the session, and I hope we can end the session preventing our electricity market from being remonopolized and see the rates go up and reshuffle the deck. We'll have a new energy committee and a new chairman come January, and hopefully we'll be able to move things in the other direction, give people more choice.
I'd like to add to that briefly, if I may. He's being a little bit modest. Representative Glenn clearly is thought of as the odds-on favorite to become the next chair of the Energy Committee. That would be wonderful for the entire state of Michigan. He really, it cannot be underscored enough or emphasized what he has almost single-handedly done, working with a wonderful team of people for sure in the energy arena. And certainly, as he has mentioned, Steve Ellebrecht and John Bartos. We look at Ted Skinner, a fellow Dow Corning guy. He and I have a special relationship there. Brooke Beebe, Pete Milojevic. These are real people in Midland County in particular who have a vested interest for everybody, for the best interest of those who pay those rates every single month. And competition is what Representative Glenn has successfully been fighting for, and not a monopoly, but a case where people are genuinely able to compete. That's going to bring down prices. He has seen this from the beginning, and he read volumes of books. He had several meetings. He understands and gets it. And so it would be wonderful if indeed, the way most people are suspecting this is going to turn out, that if it's Chairman Representative Gary Glenn of Midland who would be chairing energy, that will be wonderful, I believe, for every ratepayer in this state.
And Representative, your work on energy, your work on other issues has been recognized within Lansing. You were named the Freshman Legislator of the Year, Rookie of the Year, as you will. But let's be honest, that is a nice honor, and it recognizes the work you have done.
Well, I didn't even know they offered that award, and the last time I was a freshman I had bangs. But they did. The Reporters for Michigan Information Research Service, the oldest publication, daily publication of news from the state capitol. Their reporters who cover everything that we do in both the House and the Senate selected me from among 55 first-term state representatives and senators as the most effective first-term legislator of the year. Freshman Legislator of the Year is what they called it. So that was certainly an honor, and as I said recently in a League of Women Voters forum, I was certainly proud to receive that recognition on behalf of Bay and Midland counties, to get that kind of recognition for the people that I represent. I want people to know how seriously and diligently I have taken the responsibility that they gave me to be their state representative. And I used to joke that I had not studied this hard since college, but the truth is I didn't study this hard in college to learn. And really at age 57, 58, it was a neat experience to be presented with an issue where I had to study as hard as I did to even be able to talk the lingo, the term, to know what somebody's talking about when they're using the industry terms that relate to energy generation. So I did work hard, and I guess as an indication that became apparent to people, that's very gratifying on behalf of the people that I represent, because it assures them that I must have been serious about doing the job. If the media, that, you know, we Republicans tend to think the media is biased against us, and if the media selected me from both Republicans and Democrats as the most effective freshman, then that's a feather in the cap of the people I hope will see it that way in Bay and Midland counties, that their representative was recognized for being effective and diligent in doing the job. And I certainly will consider to take that attitude into the future if I continue to have that privilege.
You know, it was in 1947 that Jackie Robinson was the oldest Rookie of the Year ever, but Representative Glenn just outdid him.
And, you know, Representative, I'm struck too in the times we have talked here. A lot of times your discussions have almost followed sort of a high school civics class model of how the system is supposed to work. You have told me that You talked to your fire chief, and accordingly you went to work on some legislation. You talked to some folks who were concerned about literacy, so you worked to amend some legislation. The work that you're doing as a state representative has been molded in part too by the folks back home that you represent.
Well, and that literacy issue is another feather in the cap for people back home. It was the director of the Bay City Dyslexia Center who had a meeting with me and another person that I thought were going to be at odds. One person was for the third grade reading bill. I expected Nancy Williams of the Bay City Literacy School to be against it. Instead, that meeting produced an amendment which Representative Amanda Price, chairman of the Education Committee, that Nancy authored, that Representative Price agreed to put in the bill, which has now been signed into law by the governor. And I asked Nancy Williams from Bay City, is this a little thing or a big thing? And she said, if the public school system will actually implement what the law says and give children who are found to have reading deficiencies something that is sequential and multisensory. Now, not being a reading teacher of children who face this challenge, I don't know in detail what those terms mean, but they mean very specific things to teachers. And she said if they will actually implement this sequential, multi-sensory type of teaching, that it will eliminate dyslexia as a cause of reading deficiency in the state of Michigan. That's not a little thing, it's a big thing. And frankly, I feel privileged, I feel blessed to have been able to play even a small role in making that happen. But I give the credit to Nancy Williams of the Bay City Dyslexia Center. So as I said, I have learned I don't have to be the expert as long as I have expert witnesses back home in the district that I represent. And that's just another example, and I'm thrilled at just the possibility that I could have had even a small hand in something that somebody who knows far more about that issue than I do says will eliminate dyslexia as a cause of reading deficiency for all public school students in Michigan. I don't know that I can top that, however long I may have the privilege, but it certainly has been a privilege just to be part of the process. And John, I think these regular interviews that you and I do are also part of the process, because Midland is blessed to be one of the few remaining communities that has a community public access channel so that these can even be available to viewers in Midland and Bay counties. And so I want to make every opportunity of keeping the people that I represent informed so that they have an opportunity to have input. That's supposed to be the way it works, isn't it, Mike?
Yes,
it's supposed to be the people who are in charge of determining who represents them. And the more educated they are, in fact, Thomas Jefferson said you had to have an educated citizenry. So I think this is a public service too that we do just by, on a regular basis, every several weeks, getting the information out to people so that they know what's going on and can have appropriate input. And I'm supposed to serve as their state representative. That's the whole point.
Along those lines, too, rewinding to the early part of your term, I know you had heard, a lot of your colleagues had heard, about some abuses in the realm of civil asset forfeiture. You went to work on that. That was, in fact, your first bill to become a public act, wasn't it?
Well, right, and if we're doing a review of what have we accomplished, that's one of the several bills, and I think every bill I've introduced, and I didn't expect this, has passed not every one I've introduced, but every one that's been brought to the floor for a vote has passed with more than 100 votes.
Out of
110,
roughly.
So I think they were 105, 106, so overwhelming bipartisan support. Now that may shock some of my critics back home, at least the things that they said about me when I was first running for this office, but I have worked collaboratively and cooperatively with equally willing Democrats. The energy issue is not a partisan issue, and it was a bipartisan coalition that did the civil asset forfeiture legislation. I had one bill in that package that became law, and also the legislation that just passed with more than 100 votes to apply the Freedom of Information Act type of law and requirements to both the governor and the legislature. That was bipartisan, and I was a co-sponsor of that. And so I have worked cooperatively with Republicans and Democrats based on the principle and the substance of the issues to craft bipartisan solutions. Not every issue is available for that, but a lot of issues are. And in my wheelhouse, so to speak, on the energy issue, you have Republicans and Democrats on both sides of that issue. You might have the Michigan Education Association in support of saving electricity savings for schools because more money goes into the classroom or for teacher salaries, while you have the unionized workers who work at the utility power plants, they're on the other side of the issue. And so you have Republicans and Democrats on both sides of that issue. I think that's an issue in particular that's going to require a bipartisan crafted position that's in the best interests of all citizens of Michigan. But that's just an example. I have conservative principles. I've been honored on several occasions to be scored the most conservative member of the House. That's consistent with Tony Stamas and John Molinar. When they preceded me in this position, they were graded out as most conservative in the House. I won one award, the Award for Conservative Excellence for the American Conservative Union in 2015, being the most conservative. And yet at the same time, without compromising my principles, I have been willing to work with Democrats, Republicans alike, even to the point where Democrats have praised my bipartisanship on the various issues. So it's not about Republican or Democrat. It's about finding what works for the people of Michigan. And in my case, on an issue on which I have focused, trying to lower the cost of living for the people of Bay and Midland counties and everywhere else in Michigan. Everybody has to flip on the light switch in the morning just to be able to brush your teeth. And on the other hand, Dow Chemical is going 24 hours a day. And if they lose electricity for even 1 minute, it costs them millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. So it's from one end to the other a very important issue, and it requires bipartisan solutions.
Representative, we only have a couple of minutes left, but you've been paying attention to your local school systems too. You talked about the energy issue as it pertains to local schools. You've been involved with at-risk funding as well. So clearly that has been something that you've worked on this term, and again, I assume you'll be working on in the next couple of years.
I will, and I think we're going to get there. We got established in principle in the 2015 budget that we passed that at-risk money should follow the child and not be distributed on the basis of what percentage of at-risk children are in a particular school district. Almost 1 out of 4 students, for example, in one of our better off school districts, the Midland School District, qualify for the federal definition of being at risk. And yet the Midland Public Schools has never gotten any of that funding because it only goes to schools that meet a certain threshold, 50% at risk. So we had it as a matter of principle that if any money came available in addition to the currently budgeted for the education system, that it would be distributed to the child, not to the system. The next budget year, we actually appropriated, I think it was $18 million that was actually going to go in part to Midland Public Schools for the first time for at-risk students. We had a $300 million shortfall right at the end of the process where we finished the budget, and that was one of the casualties that ended up on the cutting floor. But I think in the next year's budget that we're going to, for the first time, be able to allocate at-risk funding to Midland Public Schools for the first time ever. And I credit Jerry Wasserman, Mike Sharrow, but it was Jerry who first communicated to me his belief that the money should follow the child. If you have an at-risk child, they ought to receive their share of that funding, and it shouldn't be determined based on it's not an at-risk district. It's not the district that's at risk, certainly not in the case of Midland schools. It's the child who is. And if there's going to be money appropriated for at-risk children, everybody ought to get their share of it, including Midland Public Schools. They've never gotten it before. I'm committed, and Representative Tim Kelly, I believe, will be in a position next year, perhaps as chairman of the Education Committee. He's also committed to it. We've met with Mike Sharrow and with Jerry Wasserman, and so I think that's going to happen next term. And we've covered, you asked what did we do in the first 2 years. We've covered just a handful of the hundreds of issues that come before us as members of the legislature on which I've had to cast a vote. And by the way, I make a point of this as well. Even having gone through radiation and chemotherapy for 5 months, I have never missed a committee meeting, and I've never missed a floor vote, fulfilling my job as state representative for the people of Bay and Midland counties. Now, I can only say that because when I was too sleepy and too tired and laid on my back from chemo to drive to Lansing, my wife took time out of her schedule to drive me to Lansing. So I am appreciative to my wife, Annette, but it was a commitment we shared to the job that the people of Bay and Midland counties gave me, and one that I'm proud of. So as my first term comes to a close, I hope that the people who entrusted me with this position will have a positive view of whatever I've been able to accomplish on their behalf.
Okay. Mike Goschka, Representative Gary Glenn, thank you both very much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us.